Welcome. Discover the power of the collective creativity. Join us on the Creative Catalyst Hive for inspiring stories, practical tips, and expert guidance to unlock your creative potential. Ignite your creativity. Join the Hive.
Hi, Beth. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for joining me today on the podcast. And I want to start off by asking you, what does creativity mean to you?
Creativity means anything that brings you joy, that I guess you're able to express yourself. So I think people don't always know when they're being creative, but I think if you're decorating your home or cooking a good meal or um, doing fun makeup or putting together an outfit, all of that's creative.
Agreed. So, what is your favorite creative pursuit these days?
Mostly what I'm working on is writing.
Mhm.
So I've written a novel and I'm about in the third or fourth rewrite, however you want to count it.
Mhm.
So, and started some other books to go along with it. And I got a lot going on writing wise.
Neat. What is your favorite genre to write in?
What I'm working on right now is historical romance. So that's probably my favorite genre to read. So it's been fun for me.
Neat. What got you into this passion of writing?
Um, I have loved writing since I was a kid. And I think it first started with being a reader. My I have, very cozy memories of being read to as a child. And then, my parents were readers and modeled that at home. So I became a reader. And then I think just over time, I just started telling myself stories. And sixth or seventh grade, I started writing them down. And um, so early on, I wanted to be a writer. And early on, my goal at that time really was to write and illustrate children's books. Um, and when I went to college, that was my goal. So I majored in English and I had a double minor in art and creative writing. So um, then I graduated and didn't know how to pursue it. You go and you learn how to do the craft, but then nobody really gives you a template for what to do at that point. And I think I just kind of got lost over time, really just having to work and pay bills and do all of that. And I did public relations for a long time.
Mhm.
So that allowed me to be creative at work because I did a lot of writing for um, for public relations, and but it was a different kind of writing. So
That is free thinking.
yeah.
Mhm. What do you think is the most rewarding about being able to creative write?
First, you just have to do it for yourself and enjoy the process of getting the story down because I mean, as much as most writers would like for somebody else to enjoy their story or maybe to become a popular writer, um, it's it's hard to be noticed. It's hard to get published and all of those things. So you've got to love it for yourself and just love and want the story for yourself, I guess. It's, you
Hmm.
know,
So then how has writing impacted you in your life and the lives around others?
I don't know because I'm an empty nester, so it hasn't impacted like my because once I started really getting back into it, my children were older.
Mhm.
And so I don't think it impacted as far as me having to salvage time and figure out how to do it around them. I think being an empty nester kind of gave me that time to
Mhm.
pursue it. Um, and my husband is he's very supportive. He wants me to write, and he thinks I'm going to be fabulously successful and have movies and everything. So He's the optimist.
But you mentioned your son too, right? Because he also isn't one.
My son is also a writer. We have different genres and different ways that we attack our writing. But but I enjoy reading, even though his genre is not what I normally would pick off of a shelf. I enjoy reading the stuff that he's written. So he's pretty good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So tell me, what are some challenges or obstacles that get in your way of writing? Obviously, time isn't a huge issue for you because you're retired and you have that time for the most part, but what does get in the way?
Um, I think most writers are procrastinators because it really can be hard to sit down and make yourself do it. And for me, it's not so much writer's block. I haven't really had where I didn't have a story I wanted to write. I've always had kind of a story I wanted to write. Sometimes it's more for me, where I'm going with it or um, what needs to happen. And sometimes, and I think a lot of times what the creative process in writing isn't always at the keyboard. A lot of it, there's a lot going on in your head while you're doing other things.
Mm-hmm.
And then sitting down and trying to get it down. But yeah, sometimes it's hard to make myself sit down and do it. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So
How do you balance this creative pursuit of writing with, I don't know, being a grandma, new grandma, wife, a mom, all the things, and you're still working a part-time too, right?
yes, I I need that though, because what I find for myself, I have always been a person that the busier I am, the more I get done. If I have too much time, I waste it. So it's better for me. Like if I know that I have to work certain hours on a day, then I'm much more likely to use the time I have to sit down and write. If I'm not in the mood to write and I have plenty of time, I'll think, oh, I'll do that this afternoon, or I'll do that tomorrow, But if I know tomorrow I have to work, so I have to do it today.
Mm-hmm.
I need boundaries. So I actually looked for something I could do part-time to frame my week so that I actually write on my writing days, because if I had 5 straight days, and I often write on Saturdays too, because we have some property. My husband likes to get out in the woods. And so a lot of Saturdays he goes to the property and that leaves the house empty for me. So a lot of times I will write on Saturdays too. But if I actually need it, I need something to frame my time, because then it makes me manage my time and it actually makes me write. I'm actually better when I'm busy.
Self-accountable.
Yes, yes. If I have too much time, then like I said, I just waste it.
Mm-hmm. I'm guilty of that too. I have to stay busy, otherwise nothing could get done, right?
Yeah.
Um, what is a way that you could get someone who wants to start writing to start writing? Like, what would you suggest that they do? Some tips, tricks, wisdom?
Um, for me, the thing that got me back into writing is I actually discovered some people I knew were writing and pursuing it, and had gotten, um, had either self-published or were getting published through small publishers. So it actually got me excited, because now I had someone who could give me advice and say, this is what you need to do. This is what's expected in the industry, because things have changed in the industry. Books that I read in the 70s and 80s might not get published today because they don't follow certain things that editors are looking for today. So, like, for instance, romances I read early on did a lot of head hopping. They point of view shifted a lot during a chapter, and that was okay. And that's not acceptable anymore. So you can shift check characters, POV, but you have to do it. Each character needs its own chapter now. There's a lot of things that have changed, and some of it I'm still having a hard time with. Like, for me, it was always, what's a more interesting way to say he said, he interrupted, he exclaimed, or whatever, and now apparently they want you to say he said, and that's it. And that's real hard for me. And actually, I don't always do it. I try not to put tags as much as I can anyway, but when I do use a tag, it's hard for me to just say he said. And I'm going back and changing some of them, and I'm leaving some because I feel like, well, an editor is going to tell me if that's okay or not.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but
put
your voice into it when you add the word choices, helping you.
Right. They're like, you don't say he whispered, he growled, he did. It's like, and I want to.
Yes,
I guess, and I think the rule of thought is he said is, or she said is, like disappears, like the reader doesn't even notice it. Mm-hmm. that you don't want the tags to be even noticed. So that's why that makes them more invisible.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
In your novel, how much of it's dialogue versus not, would you think?
Oh, it's probably more dialogue than not. But so maybe 60% or 70% dialogue. I don't know. I haven't thought about that.
No worries. No, I was curious because I was thinking like that would be hard to, nobody wants to.
Yeah, because when you're using it a lot,
yeah,
and sometimes you have like sometimes how somebody speaks might be part of their personality that you want to convey, and so somebody might have a gravelly voice that you're trying to convey or whatever.
Mm-hmm. So out of everything you've written so far, what is your favorite thing and why?
I like the story that I've written that I'm rewriting. And although I have to admit that I'm getting really tired of it, I want to put it to bed and start on the sequels and that kind of thing. But I have to slog through this part of it. I don't know. I really like my characters. I like the story, and I can picture it, I guess, in my head. So hopefully somebody else will like it too.
What about if somebody were to get a piece of paper and a pencil or pen, or start sitting down at the computer and start typing? Where would you tell them to start?
That I wouldn't. I wouldn't tell them where to start, because the way I write, most people say is the wrong way to do it. But that is the way my brain works. I usually start with seeing a scene in my head, and then I just write the scene down. And a lot of times I have no idea where that scene is going. I don't know much about the people that are in the scene. I don't know why my brain works that way, but it does. And so I start with the scene, I get the scene down, and then I just start fleshing it out as I go. Most people will tell you, plot it out, get a timeline, know your characters inside out. And then I tend to write chronologically, but some people don't. Some people see a bunch of scenes, and then they put them together. Mm-hmm. I tend to write chronologically, and another rule of thumb is just get the story down, then go back and put in all the imagery and change the words and and refine it. And my brain doesn't work that way either. I'm much slower. I'm kind of a plotter. I can sit there for, half an hour trying to figure out what my person is trying to say and how I'm going to say it. And I'll get stuck right there. And until I get it, we're not going to move on. So like for me, if I write 2,000 words a day, that's a lot for me. And it's probably not for most novelists.
What about when you were in the classroom and you had to teach writing to students? How did you handle that?
I hated it. It was my least favorite thing to teach kids, and which is ironic since I love to do it myself. And I think maybe that was part of why I hated it, is because they didn't love it too. And and I think as a teacher, it was much easier for me to hook them into liking to read than liking to write. I could find a book, especially when I taught middle school. I hooked a lot of kids and turned them into readers, and it was very gratifying. But writing is the first step to being a writer. Is you have to be a reader. And if you've got kids who don't like to read or read very little, you can't explain the nuances of a character or how to find your own voice or what tone is. It's very difficult, and most students tend to write the way they speak. So getting them to think about voice and word choice and all of that it's hard.
So what did you end up boiling it down to? Did you have some sort of
Well,
or...
yeah. Most writing that you have to do in the classroom is nonfiction anyway. So you do boil things down into a pattern for them. Usually, they have to, you make them write a thesis statement to begin with, and so that you know where they're going, and then what claims are they going to make, or, depending on what type of writing it is, and then teaching them how to develop paragraphs, and sometimes even telling them, depending on what it is they're doing, how many paragraphs they need to, if you're trying to prove a point and you're proving 3 points, then you're going to have your introduction, your 3 body paragraphs that each are fleshing out each point, and then your conclusion, tying it all together, and you kind of get them to do that. Writing fiction, I have had students write fiction, and usually I will give them some template to follow, where even if it's just a plot chart or a story, sometimes I would give them the plot chart, and they had to put what was going to happen on the chart. So
do you use any of those tools when you write, or no?
No.
You put your scene somewhere on there where it goes. No.
No, I know what my climax is going to be. For me, it's figuring out how to get there. And I am what a lot of writers will call, I'm a pantser, which means I fly by the seat of my pants. When I sit down, I very often don't know where I'm going. I have a vague idea what direction I'm going to, and then I start having my characters talk to each other, and the next thing I know, I'm someplace else.
So how would you feel if somebody took your story, assuming it was appropriate for middle school or high school students, and turned it into a star STEM question? How would you, considering it'll even start that way?
I think that I would be astounded, for one thing, because, as I said, I don't set out to make something assemble or to, and it does happen. And sometimes, I mean, I've got a story that that is a sequel to the one that I'm working on, that I've written a few chapters, and I have some symbolism in there that may or may not be noticed. But generally speaking, as I'm writing, I discover, oh, I've put a symbol in here and I didn't realize it. Or um, one of my friends who did some developmental writing for me, or developmental editing for me, pointed out some things in this story that she's like, you put this in here, you need to repeat it in here. This needs to be a motif, you know. And, and
So sometimes you're intentional about including different elements of fiction, and sometimes they just happen as you start writing.
yes, yes, yes. So the fact to make it a star question would be really ironic to me, that for somebody to say the author chose this because, and then I would like to see if they're right. If that is why I did it that way.
You don't use a plot diagram. Do you foil your characters when you start? Do you I don't know, use your character analysis chart, your little cookie man cutter that maybe you taught back in school?
I don't.
Actions, thoughts, and feelings.
I do not. Now I do sometimes stop and do things like I was trying to figure out where everything was as I was writing, because where people were moving between buildings and everything. And so I did sit down and draw a map to solidify it. And I've done that before. I have made, because this book is going to have sequels, I have done a timeline for where the sequels fall time-wise and how old everybody will be at those points. But no, as far as no. And the other thing, a lot, I've heard a lot of authors talk about, well, how do you name characters? How long does it take you? And what do you? And I'm going to be real honest. Usually they name themselves. And I have absolutely no idea why that name, but sometimes I'll look up the meaning of the name and it'll fit. And I'm like, I don't know how I did that, but and and I'll have, like, if I know somebody's a carefree spirit, I'll kind of try to have a name that I associate with that. Or if they're kind of tight and buttoned up, I try to think of a name that I think of as like being prim and proper and or old fashioned or whatever it is. But
oh, that's neat. That's neat. So if I were going to sit down, and I've already written down my thoughts, even though you told me you weren't going to tell me how to start it, where would you tell me to take it once I finish writing my first piece? What would be your next piece of advice?
What I would do is actually, during the writing, the thing that helped me the most is finding a group of writers that met weekly. And I think when I first actually started, they met monthly, but that I had something that I had to present at that time. And now with Zoom, it makes it so much easier because we don't even get out of our houses. We just get online and have our critiques, and we have a Google location where we post all of our writing, and we can all access and read it. And then we get together and discuss what everybody wrote. And, if we see a plot hole or something bothers us about it, or a place where they need to give more information or whatever. So that has helped me, as I was writing, keep on track. And then at the end, having writer friends that'll read the whole piece. then I would find a developmental editor and let them look at it. And luckily for me, one of my writer friends does that on the side. So she did that for me. And then, she says I need to send it to another developmental editor one more time and then to a copy editor. So, but hopefully I'm catching a lot of that because I'm still presenting to my critique group, and they're critiquing it as we go. And so
It's so interesting. So you take your ideas, your thoughts, your stories, you put them all together, and then you still go and you get feedback before you even say, I'm done, which again is a whole different ball game than in the classroom, right? They just do it to be done. They're not.
well, right. And that's one of the hardest things to get kids to do is revise and edit, because first of all, they don't want to, but second of all, they don't think they need to. They think I'm done. And if you get them to do anything, it is editing. They'll go through and go, oh, this is misspelled and this needs a period. But they don't revise. They don't understand that revising is different than editing. To them, those words are synonymous, and that is very, very difficult to teach. And even though I would always put that in as part of the writing process, because I would have my deadlines, and then these days would be days where they were supposed to trade with somebody and have the person critique their work and vice versa. All they did was say, oh, you need a period. And that was it. They didn't say, oh, there's a terrible plot hole in the middle here where.
So true. But it's okay. That's why we have real authors like yourself. If anybody wanted to maybe see some of your work or, support you in any way, could they find you anywhere online?
Not currently. And that actually is a problem, that because apparently these days, to even be noticed by a publisher, you already need to have an online presence. And I honestly don't know how to do that. I have a Facebook, but it's just my personal Facebook. I don't post anything there. So that is an area that I am weak in. And I, and it's good and bad, because in the past, all of that was done for you if they picked up your story. And now they want you to have done a whole lot of the footwork up front, and and have an online presence that they can see. And then because of the internet, a lot of people who are not getting published the regular way are still getting published. They publish themselves, they put things out there. So it's good and bad. It gives people more avenues to get their work out there, but it also muddies the water as to as to who's doing what.
Right. No, it's definitely something else to research and learn about. Well, I have greatly appreciated your time with me, and I am so excited to get inside your head as a writer. And
it's a scary place to be, isn't it?
I think it just shows that everyone's creativity is fostered differently, and it comes out and looks different for each person, and all of that should be celebrated, which is why teaching writing in the classroom is so hard, because one, you have a deadline and timelines, and two, you're trying to teach everybody the same thing, and not everybody thinks the same way. And that's very difficult.
Not everybody thinks the same way. And honestly, not everybody wants to be a writer. You've got kids sitting in your class that are math brains that want to be engineers, and they have no desire to write something down at all. And So, you're having to drag it out of the majority of your kids.
Right. There's a difference from the life skills of writing like something worth their time, a good email or, a business
Right.
like that, as we discussed previously, but not everybody's going to be a creative writer because not everybody's creative in that way. And that's okay.
Yeah. They are creative in many other ways, but yeah.
Agreed. Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Take
It
care.
was fun.
Yes, agreed. Bye.
Bye.
Join the Hive where ideas thrive, a buzzing hub of creativity alive. The Creative Catalyst Hive, your guiding light. Ignite your spark, take flight. Thanks for listening with your host, creativity coach, Misty Hummel.